Well, welcome to another Cutting Edge show. I'm Omar Neal, the former mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama, host of the You Got the Power radio talk show, and the co-host of this great show called The Cutting Edge. This program is being brought to you in part by the University of Maryland School of Public Health. You know, today we are going to really have a great show today. This is a 2-year review of what took place over the past 2 years as it relates to COVID-19. 1 million souls we lost during this time. Just yesterday, we reached that grim milestone of 1 million people who lost their life to COVID. But today we're going to discuss the blessings and the lessons of a pandemic. And in all things, there's a blessing and a lesson. And so we're going to discuss that. We got an excellent panel today. We got Dr. Alicia Jawani, who is a burn, trauma, and general surgeon. We have Dr. Mayor Lucinia Dunn, who is the president and CEO of Tuskegee-Macon County Community Foundation, Inc. We have Dr. Neil Segal, who is the assistant professor of health policy and management at the University of Maryland. We have Dr. Jacqueline Brooks, who's the former superintendent of the Macon County Public Schools, but currently the executive coaching coordinator for the school superintendents of Alabama. And we have last but certainly not least, Dr. Ernest Carter, health officer for Prince George County, Maryland. And we're going to have a great show today. Don't forget you can join us and tune into this show with all of the social media platforms. And don't forget that every week you can catch us right here at 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe to this program. We also have a newsletter that we would like for you to subscribe to. Each and every week, we put a newsletter out that highlights all of the things that we talked about the previous week. The shows are on there, excerpts from the shows. All of that is right there. So let me say this, as we think about this, as we think about the notion that we have come to a pivotal space where we have to recognize that we've lost loved ones, we've lost friends, we've lost colleagues, we've lost family members. And the best way I think we can start this show out, this special show, is with the spirit of the ancestors. And so with that in mind, I want us to begin with Lift Every Voice and Sing, a rendition that you will not soon forget.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a heralding the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you for that. Now, without any further ado, let me bring on my co-host. He is Dr. Stephen B. Thomas. We call him Dr. T around these parts. He's a brother from another mother, a friend indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the co-host of The Cutting Edge, Dr. Stephen B. Thomas. Hey, Dr. T, how you doing?
Mayor, it's always a good day when I'm with you. And what a moment at this time of reflection with the 1 million+ souls that we've lost here in our own country, an underestimation and a global underestimation around the world. This is still a pandemic.
You're
but
right.
What you just did in setting up this show with our ancestors is to realize this: hey, we've been in tough times before, but you get inspiration. And that's what this show does. So yes, it's time for that kind of reflection, but also finding inspiration. And I think we got a great lineup for conversation today.
Oh man, the lineup is off the chain. You know, I mean, I'm so excited to have everybody on. Some I've just met for the first time, but it's like I've known everybody 1,000 years.
Mayor, let me
Go
just
ahead.
say this as an elected official, and as we open up the show and let people know, this is you're in the barbershop and the salon. This is where you have an authentic conversation. Civic engagement could not be more important with the stakes at hand, and monitoring what kind of conversations are going on in the barbershops and salons about voting. Are they registered? All these things are important as you simply look at what's in the front pages of the newspaper. There's so much at stake.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. But you know, Dr. T, we could not do this if it were not for the team behind the scene.
There we go.
And like to bring up our support cast, the individuals who make us look good each and every week. This is our cutting edge team, headed up by Meg Jordan, our technical director, assisted by Maggie Daly, assistant technical director, Soraya Khan, social media and communications guru, Kimberly Kimmy Fleming, who is our social media and media curator, and of course, our sound designer is Elijah Pugh Jr., all of which make up the team behind the scene, and they are necessary, essential to a successful program, and they do their jobs very well.
And I love the diversity. I love the diversity.
Absolutely. Good. All right. Well, you know, Dr. T, we're going to bring up, let's bring up Dr. Carter first. We know that he may have to leave us. Now, if you don't have the people at the door, like I told you, that to lock him in where he can't go anywhere. I sent them. I hope they're at the right address. Because we don't want Dr. Carter to leave us, man. Dr. Carter is the health officer for Prince George County, Maryland, and he's been on the show before, so he's no stranger to the cutting edge. Dr. T, I want you to introduce our dear friend.
Well, let me just say this: I've had the pleasure of knowing Dr. Carter during his entire time as the health officer in Prince George's County. That means before the pandemic, and his commitment to addressing the health disparities, you know, those underlying conditions, remember those? He was on that early. But leadership really matters in the midst of a tragic pandemic like we've had. And Dr. Carter, I am telling you, my friend, I salute you. The county salutes you. We closed the disparity gap in this state, right here in this county, with his leadership. So let's bring Dr. Carter up. And Dr. Carter, if you would just take a moment, people had a chance to read all the accolades in your bio, but can you tell this audience a little bit about who you are? How would you introduce yourself?
Well, I am a country boy. I'm in Dyersburg, Tennessee, if you all
All
know where
right.
that is. And I grew up in with a family who loved me. And from that point, they also taught me to love everybody else.
Okay.
From that point, they taught me to what it meant to have faith in what you do and have the faith in yourself and faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
Know that what we're put on this earth to do is to help people and help them to help themselves. So that was the spirit that I grew up in. I grew up in a community, and I think everybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
It was a family. Sometimes we disagreed, sometimes we were,
Mhm.
but we always made sure that we took care of one another. So
Okay.
I messed up. Everybody who my mother knew found me and made sure that I did the right thing. I came from those beginnings. I actually grew up in Jackson, Tennessee, and was basically steeped at Lane College, which was a HBCU. Those professors taught me what to do. I went to other institutions, like I went to Harvard and Harvard Medical School, but I really learned what I learned. I learned
Okay.
to learn in the family that I grew up with, what was the family of the community that I lived in. And so my introduction is that I am a person who is steeped in community. I believe in people. I believe in helping people. And I believe in using whatever talent I have to contribute, to make sure that we elevate ourselves to that position where we can use our talents to help and fit into the whole collective, as opposed to being just this one person over here who's doing X, Y, and Z. So that's who I am. I am a person who loves to be part of the mission, part of the human family.
Well, I hope
Mayor-
that you see yourself as a part of this family as well, Dr.
Absolutely.
Carter, for sure.
I wanted you to know, Mayor Neal, that Dr. Carter is indeed part of this family. I just learned something about him I didn't know, those Tennessee roots. And there's a certain humility that you bring to this job. And a time when people are looking up to leaders, they don't want to be looked down on. And you've never done that. And I think the community really appreciates that leadership style. Thank you so much for being with us here this evening.
Thank
Good.
you.
So just hang out with us. We're going to get into the conversation. Let's bring up our next panelists so that we can truly understand the breadth and depth of the knowledge that we come with today. Let's bring up Dr. Jawani. Dr. Alicia Jawani is a person that I had an opportunity to meet just recently. I was at the Selma movement, the enactment of the Bloody Sunday. And I was on the corner, and she walked up with the former governor of Alabama, and we started a conversation. And from that moment, I knew that Dr. Jawani was somebody I wanted to stay in touch with. She is a burn, trauma, and general surgeon. She has just recently established her own 501c3 organization to take medicine to another level, to create accessibility to what she does to the general populace. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Alicia Jawani. How you doing, Dr. Jawani?
This is our snaps. This is how we welcome you. We're applauding. Welcome to the cutting edge.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor. I really appreciate it. I'm actually in the same camp as Dr. Carter here. My parents are African-American, they're born in Uganda and Zanzibar and first generation American. So it's very, very humbling and very sweet to hear a story that Dr. Carter shared about how his family roots and his community really shaped who he has become today, because that is a story that resonates so well with me, right? So coming to the United States, my parents had to figure out, what American life was like. And in that and through that, they really, really raised us kids with this ideal that, you can grow up poor, you can grow up rich, you can grow up however you want to grow up. But the one thing that is the most powerful is a sense of community. And that community grows from being willing and able to share and to be loving and kind. And also to get an education, right? So you can steal everything but your knowledge. And so that's really the impetus for becoming a surgeon, particularly in burns. While that was, I think, a little bit like divinely ordained, but I think in the end game, that mission to create Nia Benefit Corporation is really there, inspired to be able to revolutionize and transform the healthcare system as it is into something that's better, and people have access to care. People can afford their care. People are not afraid to come and seek care for any reason that they may be embarrassed to talk about, because the care is there for everyone. And so that is the ultimate goal and mission of the Nia Benefit Corporation.
Good. We're going to talk about your corporation. In fact, just a little snippet of because I think a corporation was complete today or yesterday, somewhere close.
Yesterday, yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about it.
Come on now, wait. Come on, let's talk about
Some snaps.
now.
We got to give her some. We're excited about this. I mean, I've been talking about you the whole time. So tell just a little bit. Just don't give everybody. Don't empty the whole wagon. Just look.
Full sample.
The short version is that right now, burn care, if you were to get burned today, if your mom, your dad, you're the electrician, right? Someone cooking your food in a restaurant got burned today, they would traditionally go to an emergency department to go get care. If they went to their primary care doctor or their urgent care, most often those individuals there, even though they try their hardest, they're not burn specialists. So they end up kind of shuttling people through the emergency department system. And we all know, right, that when you go to the ED, you're looking at your watch saying like, oh, well, it's been 4 hours. Now it's been 7 hours. It's been 10 hours. Can I get seen yet? Right. So unless you're like dying from this burn, you don't get seen in a timely fashion. And then the bill you get, you're like, dang it, if I had known that I didn't need this or that, I wouldn't have gone to the ED, because then you're looking at like a $24,000 bill to go to the ED, right? So the cost of care is really high. The accessibility to burn trained specialists like myself is few and far between. Just so that you know, there's only like 65 of us that are actively practicing in the United States that are fellowship trained burn surgeons, not like trauma surgeons, general surgeons who like see burns. And so the mission of the company, the essence of the company is to make burn care accessible for those 80% of Americans that don't ever need to see the inside of an ED or a hospital system. So it is the first outpatient burn care model in the United States.
Come on now.
Wow.
Come on.
Wow.
That's
This
huge
is incredible.
and transformative in the lives of the people you treat.
Absolutely. Accessibility. We've always talked about that. And as we think about accessibility, let's bring on a mayor. There are, it's a unique organization of families of mayors. Once you become a mayor, you're a mayor for life. Well, the first female mayor in the city, the first and only female mayor of the city of Tuskegee is Dr. Lucinia Dunn. She currently serves as the president and CEO of the Tuskegee-Macon County Community Foundation, Inc. She is one of the leaders who put together a coalition to address the issue of COVID that has spanned 2 years, with each Saturday a meeting to update and to inform and to strategize on how we can keep our community safe. It's that kind of vision that she brings to the table. She's no stranger to the Maryland and DC area. In fact, that's where she used to hang out. That's where she used to live. And so she came back home. She's a native of Tuskegee, Alabama. So she's not a stranger to where we are, but she's a dear friend, a mentor, a friend, a sister from another mister. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lucinia Mayor Dunn.
All rise.
Unmute yourself, Dr. Mayor Dunn. Unmute yourself, please.
All right.
Here we
Okay,
go.
I'm
There
gonna
you
follow
go.
orders. I tell you, I've never had an introduction quite like that before. So my good friend Mayor Neal and I have commiserated and planned and plotted together, and I am so honored to be on this show. Though he has promised me 992 times that I was going to be on here, so I finally made it.
I'm just trying to be like they say, like Jesus. Maybe not there when you want me, but I'm right on time.
And I think you are, to talk about such an important subject. Dr. Carter, your description of how you came up reminded me of myself, because I'm not a native of Tuskegee. I came to Tuskegee when I was 4 years old. I was born on my grandmother and grandfather's farm, which we still have some of the acreage. My grandfather had 1,000 acres, and he had people working on his farm. But the good thing about that, we had that kind of community that you did not just show out. You didn't show off. That was just frowned upon. I mean, you just thank God that you were given certain opportunities. My grandfather used to buy the land when people went north to find jobs. He would buy that property and hold that property in case they wanted to come back home. Some came and some did not. But his father taught all of us that you do two things, that you get an education and you buy land and you hold on to it. And so I have deep rural roots. And growing up in Tuskegee, that put a whole nother spin on my life, in that I learned not only about my family's history, but I learned about the history of Black people all over the world. And I always used to say that Tuskegee is the largest little city in the world, because I tell you, and when I tell people this, I mean, they kind of look at me strange, but I was in the desert in Nigeria, and I said I was from Tuskegee, and the man turned around and said, "Oh, Tuskegee!" So
Absolutely.
we are known everywhere, Tuskegee Airmen and all of that good stuff. But sadly, we have some real challenges in the rural community, and that is what I have devoted my life to. And thank you, Dr. Elisha. I can't say your last name because
Jawani. It's fine. Jawani.
Dr. Jawani, but I'm older than you, so I can call you Dr. Elisha. I like that.
That's Southern thing.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about. And I graduated from Fisk, so I do know something about Tennessee. So
Right.
I'm hooking up with everybody on this call. But you see, when I grew up in Tuskegee, we were always on that campus. And I went to Chambliss Children's House. And so we thought that everybody knew the Black National Anthem. It wasn't until later in my life that I learned that it was not a common practice to sing during that time and space and time. I grew up with a lot of people that I now know are famous, but they were regular people. And that was a great lesson, that no matter what your status is, you are a human being and you have your weaknesses and strengths like everybody else. But let me just talk about this. It was not until I came back from Fisk University thinking that I was going to party that summer before I got a job that my mother told me I had one. I was like, oh God, I'm going to work. But it was with the Tuskegee Institute Community Education Program.
Okay.
Under Dr. Bert Phillips, who is one of my mentors. He is still alive. He just celebrated his 90th birthday.
Wonderful.
But he made us get a job and really understand what that meant. And so he put us out in the community, and I was assigned to Lee County, who is now thinking that they're the best thing since sliced bread, but they used to be rural. And I, taught kids 5th grade through the 12th grade all in one room. And at night, I taught adults how to read and write.
Okay.
And one day, this man in the back of the room said, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. I can write my name. I don't have to ask nobody else no more.
Mm.
Everybody in the room started crying and hugging. And I realized that we have a lot of work to do in our community. And that started me on the trajectory of where I am right now. It is about planning and moving our people forward and getting them into places where they need to be to make a good life for themselves and for their families.
Mhm.
You know, this whole business about going north, that was traumatic for us because we left mom and them behind.
Mm.
We don't
Mhm.
talk about that emotional scarring that we often that we've experienced. I don't care what century you're talking about. We have experienced a lot of trauma, and now
Yes.
we're facing a lot of trauma now because a lot of the people that died of that million were part of our community
Absolutely.
because they didn't have the kind of medical care that they needed to have in order to survive. And
Unnecessary
you
deaths.
know, this is where I am developing plans to eliminate health and economic disparities. Say one
Okay.
last thing, and I'm gonna let you have it, Mr. Mayor. That
Okay.
is this: you can't talk about health unless you talk about money. I'm going to say that again. You cannot talk about health unless you're talking about money. And what does that mean? If I have a job and I can buy me a car, I can get my pregnant wife to the doctor in time.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to depend on somebody else to get my wife to the doctor to have, what happens? She may die. And you know, we have a very high rate of death due to childbirth in our
Yes.
Mhm.
communities. So you cannot separate that job where that person is making a good living, a good salary, from the kind of health care that our people get.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And you know what is interesting? There is a kind of common thread that runs through all of your stories. Family was very important. The orientation to give back at the genesis of your life is what is animating your work today. And so we are so appreciative for all that you've done, each of you, both seen and unseen. Okay.
We even got some more folk coming.
Absolutely. Dr. Neil Segal, let's bring him up. Dr. T, this guy hanging out at the University of Maryland. Introduce our dear friend.
Well, I'm honored to introduce Neil Segal to the cutting edge, as you can see here with his bio. But I think what's very important is his emphasis on training that next generation of young scholars committed to understanding the healthcare industry, the business side, the brokenness of it. And during the pandemic, he stepped up in ways that, as his mentor and senior faculty member, I didn't know he had it in him. Initiating national studies of college campuses around the spread of COVID, making recommendations, Dr. Carter, and some of those recommendations got blowback. And he's able to talk about the business side of what COVID has done. And hopefully, Dr. Segal, let's bring him on up, share with us what it was like in the battlefields as people push back against the science. And Neil, tell this audience, before you do that, in your own words, who you are, my friend.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. I'm Neil Segal. I am an assistant professor of health policy and management. But like some of my colleagues, my path to where I am training future scholars and doing research about health and public health and access to healthcare and health equity began with my parents. My family immigrated from India to California, so my dad could pursue a degree at UC Berkeley. And so he moved, and a year later, my mom was able to move. And due to family circumstances, the need for sending remittance money back to help support the family in India, he actually never finished his degree. and he settled in California. He stuck around and continued to work. And I had this notion of higher education from my stories from my dad and these trips to the Berkeley campus that he loved so dearly, but was never able to earn a degree from. And when my time came and I had the opportunity, I pursued my degree to finish what he started, because my family story is rooted in education in that way. And education was the opportunity for my dad to leave, but also to help. And so my parents spent their time with one foot in the US and one foot back home for them, just trying to make their community better. And of course, my community is here, right? My new community is Prince George's County, Maryland, and Washington, DC. And I feel that commitment to try to use the skills and the training that I have to try to improve the circumstances of my community. And so, as Dr. Thomas mentioned, one of the things I've done throughout my career is study the intersection of healthcare organizations and the healthcare industry and people's health, right? And Mayor Dunn, you pointed out very eloquently the distance between those two things, right? And so I study that gap. And of course, a little over 2 years ago with the pandemic, that gap became evident to more and more people, right? And one of the things that's motivated my research and an observation, and when Dr. Thomas mentions that some of these recommendations that I and my colleagues have made have been faced with pushback, it's noted in this notion that privilege is really protective during a pandemic, right? And people with power hold privilege. And whether it's lawmakers, whether it's administration on university campuses, whether it's people funding research, right? Whether it's our friends and neighbors whose attitudes about pandemic protections are different than ours, right? It's their privilege, right, that enables them to hold those views. And I can't disagree with someone's deeply held belief, right? But I can try to illustrate to them, and the best way I know how is through scholarship, right? That your circumstances aren't everybody's circumstances, right? And what I teach my students, whether it's my undergraduate trainees, I teach a very large lecture undergraduate class. I have 200 students a semester. I've taught 1,200 total students so far since I've been at Maryland. I teach them that there are two ways to judge how well a healthcare system works, right? By how well the worst off person has it, or how well the average person has it, right? And in America, we're fundamentally a country of the averages. And what that's done during the pandemic is it's left a lot of people behind, right? And I don't mean to foreshadow where our conversation may go, but I've done a lot of thinking about what the blessings of the pandemic are. And for me, in my heart, that blessing is that more and more people are forced to think about the circumstances of their neighbors, right? Of their friends, of the people that surround them in their community, because during a pandemic, everyone's circumstances affect you.
You're absolutely right, which fosters empathy, whether or not you want it to or not. When you have the same experience, you can empathize with others. And I think that this is that kind of watershed moment where we can reimagine healthcare, because empathy does exist, and we can be clear-eyed on health disparities and comorbidities and social determinants of health and all of those things that we know have plagued marginalized communities. Thank you, Dr. Segal. We certainly appreciate that, and we're going to get into that. Let me, the last but certainly not least, let me tell you this person is one of my favorite friends and people that I've known. I have watched her grow and evolve and blossom into an educational leader. She is the former superintendent of Macon County Schools, that's in Tuskegee, Alabama. She is a native of Tuskegee, Alabama. She now serves as the executive coaching coordinator for school superintendents of Alabama. So she goes around and mentors superintendents around the state of Alabama. This is a person who has committed herself to really thinking out of the box. When you looked at the way that she developed and orchestrated the public schools of Macon County. She did not do it in traditional ways. She looked in depthly to see what are the nuances, what are those special things that we can tap into to rejuvenate and to resuscitate the spirit of our children so that they can learn, so that they can be the true and perfect manifestation of God's intent for them. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a friend, my former superintendent of Macon County Schools, but always a friend, Dr. Jacqueline Brooks. Hey, Dr. Brooks, how you doing?
Hey, welcome to
Doing
the cutting
well.
edge.
Good evening, host and co-host and fellow panelists. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. And as we think about those things that have shaped who we are and the work that we do, I too have to reach back to 1968 and tell you, like many of our children that we serve in educational settings, I was in a confounded situation that I was born into. I was born to a teen mother who was impregnated by a married man who had a full family. And therefore, to keep me out of foster care and adoptive services, my grandmother took me under her wing and basically raised me as her own until my parents got their act together. And so in the work that I do, the entire family is so important. The immediate family, but that extended family of community. And so my upbringing was an upbringing by the full community. And so when I think of an illustration, I often think about the fulcrum. And for those of you who are scientists, you know what point that is. That's the point where we can try to establish balance based on the load and the effort. And so the work that I do is trying to make sure that we put in the effort as educational leaders for the loads that are either given to us or that we assume so that we can achieve as close to a utopian balance as we can as we try to educate students who come as they are into our public school doors. And so my work started out as a classroom teacher in the public education setting in Central Florida, Brevard County Schools, where we had a very diverse population of over 70,000 students who came from all walks and facets of life, but they were all there for that same purpose, to receive an education. But education is about academics, but it's about more than academics. It's a full plethora of needs and services, be it social, emotional, be it a sense of belonging, be it nutrition services, mental health and well-being, academic achievement, socialization. There's so many unique idiosyncrasies that make up that educational process. And so for me as an educational leader and training others now to be educational leaders, we have to understand that holistic process. We have to understand that, yes, it takes a village, it takes a community, then some, to meet the needs of students. And so over the years, I've adopted the turtle on the seashore story, which the little boy is there and he's picking up the turtles or the starfish. It's been told several ways. And someone says to him, why are you picking them up so that they don't die? You can't save all of them. He said, but I can save one. I can save one at a time. And so if you save one at a time, you end up saving many. And one of my recent lessons is that, when you're in a triage situation, which is what I found myself in during the pandemic, I was in uncharted waters, unknown territory. I don't have a medical background. There were a lot of political pressures coming our way. We were trying to follow the science on one hand, but with certain leaders, we were really encouraged to move away from following the science. Masking became a very huge conflict in our schools. Social distancing, in-person learning versus hybrid learning, how to keep our kids fed, how to keep them mentally sane. We had a huge technology challenge with our rural communities and being able to connect and keep school and education going. And so the progression that we're trying to embrace now is moving from triage to transformation. And that too has a lot of pressures
I
to
love
it
that.
because we are so eager to go back to what for so many years people said wasn't working. But we want to go back to that exact same model. And so if we've been in a triage situation now, we've gotten more resources than we have ever dreamed of having in education and in communities. How are we going to use those for transformation? Or are we just going to go back to what we have done as tradition? And if these situations present themselves again, here we are again in a triage situation, just in a moment and mode of survival. So those are the things that we are grappling with as educators in Macon County, Tuskegee, the state of Alabama, the nation, and the world. And when I say it is indeed a challenge, it is indeed a challenge. And so we try to learn from each of you and all of you, because we affect all careers, all aspects of life. And we have a huge challenge now where our nation was already dealing with lag in some instances. And now this is a huge breadth of learning gaps that we have to try to tackle and deal with. And how are we going to do that in a transformative way? Or are we just going to go back to those traditional constructs that had challenges, particularly for marginalized children and children of color to begin with?
Yeah.
You know, Mayor,
Yeah.
I just want to say something about the Hollywood Squares. You commented on the stories that were common, but there's something else very much in common. The humility that you see here,
Mhm.
the humility that you see here, the self-disclosure that you see here.
Mhm.
Maybe these polls help, but we need more of that so that when young people look up to us in these roles, they realize we didn't start this way and that the journey we have had, they can have too. So, and there are
Yeah.
people who get to your roles and forget how they got there.
Right.
So how did you keep true to the spirit in which we are starting this conversation? Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, people can see your glory but don't know your story, so let me go to Dr. Carter, because we don't know how long we have him. We hope that we can have him a longer time. Hint, hint. Dr. Carter, 2 years ago, it was maybe the beginning of 2020. When we first was made aware that we were in a pandemic, there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation disseminated associated with it. Some for political purposes, others for economic purposes. Some say that we didn't want to panic the country, but there were a lot of people who were in denial based on what they were told by the leadership. Tell us about when you heard about the pandemic and what was your impression of it initially?
Well, that is really an anxiety-provoking because as a public health official, we keep our eyes on the prize, on the pulse of what's going on in the world. And we had heard about this virus that had, and we knew it was a COVID virus that was in China, and that it wasn't in the United States, but the way it was spreading in China caused everybody who was in my position heart rate to go up. We were concerned. This was in December. But maybe they could contain it. Remember, during the Obama administration, Ebola there was some heartburn around that, but they contained it. And then when we had another scare around S1N1, we contained it. So it was like, okay, we might contain it. But in January, our heart rates were even faster. And I said, oh, I hope it's not going to hit our shores. But by February, we were in all out, we've got to start getting prepared for this. Now, most people weren't there at that time, but our health department had to be, because we knew, number one, that people are going to be afraid. And we needed to be able to communicate to people the science. What is this virus? How will it spread? How will it affect you? Will you die from it? What do you do to make sure you don't? And one of the things I knew I had to impress upon people was that this is a virus. We don't have a way to stop it. So we're going to have to shut things down. Well, when you tell people those type of things, they're not happy to hear it. So there was, knew that there was a lot of communications that had to be done. Talking to everybody. We have people in prisons. We have people who are in school systems. We have people who want to go down to the club. We have everybody, you know. We got people on university campuses.
That's right.
And kids who want to party. We've got all of this. Plus, we've got businesses that don't want to shut down, and football teams that still want to play. And it's when you think about it, it's overwhelming. But we knew we had to compartmentalize and make sure we understood how to communicate, but not just communicate with the cold hard science, but let people understand that this is something that's going to hit us. We're going to survive, and we're going to have to really do this as a collective. This is not just one person doing that. This is all of us.
Let me ask this, Dr. Carter. Hearing what you heard from many political leaders, knowing that it was the antithesis of what you knew, how did you deal with that, with that conundrum?
I really focused on the people and my mission. My mission was to protect people's health. I couldn't allow people to die. I couldn't allow people to go in the hospital. All of the other noise that people were saying, I had to go straight to the people and say, listen, this is what we have to do. And they have to trust what I say. You have to trust me. And that was very hard. It's not easy. But as a public health official, I had to first establish the fact that, number one, I knew what I was talking about. And number two, you have to trust me, because what I am about is the mission. And that goes back to that what I was talking about as a family. Because if you establish trust with people, meaning that they feel like you're a part of them. Dr. Thomas has done that with, like, going to the barbershops. People know who we are. Then when we say, this is a problem and you're going to have to do this, don't worry about what whoever this is over here is saying on the internet. You're going to have to believe me, because I'm going to make sure that your mother doesn't die, that your cousin doesn't die. I'm here to protect you and your family, and you trust that. That's where I go. I don't get into the big debates with the people who believe that you should drink X, Y, and Z, or math doesn't work.
And you didn't have to go there, Dr. Carter. You know,
I can't, it would be too much. We had too much energy to put into the people, into our family.
But it's hard for you to do that when people who have a bigger
Podium.
right, and microphone, right,
Yeah.
than you have. And I hear you. Let me go to Mayor Dunn. Mayor Dunn, this notion of trust is a calculated risk, right? And you make your friends before you need them, which is what Dr. Carter is really saying, right? You know, you didn't trust the system because you've seen a whole lot of other things, right, that led you to believe, and not just led you to believe, but you know it, the knowingness that they were not trustworthy, right? So how did you navigate that and evolve to even formulating the coalition, the task force to address COVID?
First of all, I certainly wish we had had Dr. Carter, because I might not have gone through all the things that I went through. So
You got him now.
I'm going to tackle the elephant in the room, and that is, truth did not equal Trump. Truth did not equal Trump. And so when he started his shenanigans, the first thing that I thought was, is he talking about saving lives, or is he talking about saving himself? And when I realized that he was really talking about saving himself and not saving the people in the United States of America, then I could not trust anything else that they said. So don't tell me anything about this, about the vaccine, because I'm not taking it. because I don't know what y'all did with it. I don't know where you manufacture. I don't know anything except that's a money-making venture. That was my thought pattern around that. And it took me a long time to get past, that feeling, because you got to add to it that our experiences with the syphilis process and
The United States Public Health Service study conducted in
well,
Tuskegee,
all of
Alabama.
that is good, but it really boiled down to, I knew people whose parents and grandparents went through that, and so, even though it was hidden from us for a long time, because I went to college and there it was right in front of me, and I'm from Tuskegee, Macon County, I had to, that was absorbed in my psyche.
Yeah.
In addition to the fact that we did not have a hospital. The doctors that I grew up with were no longer there. They were gone. They died or they were shipped out. The whole medical community was torn apart when President
Peyton.
What's his name?
Peyton.
No, VA hospital. When he tore up the VA hospital.
Oh, okay.
At Tuskegee. And I'm sure he was trying to do his best because he was trying to, integrate, and he was also trying to save money and do all those things. So there were a number of historic pieces that I had to deal with personally to make that decision. And so because I did not trust Trump, I decided I wasn't going to trust the vaccine.
So all of the people were talking to you, and you do know that one of Kizzmekia Corbett, which was one of the person, Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, was one of the people who made the Moderna vaccine, and there were a lot of African Americans.
I didn't know her.
Okay, so
I mean, I was on ABC Nightline.
So you didn't trust the system. You didn't trust the system.
I didn't trust the system. It didn't have anything. The host of, he did that at the end. He thought he had me. Pow. Well, she's Black. Well, I didn't care. I don't know her. And so we're talking about trust in terms of a larger sense, not in terms of a personal sense. And so, it took me a while to do. I said, now, what I'm going to do, and I said this publicly, I want to watch to see what happens to people. Will this thing really work? And eventually I came across and, I said, yeah, okay. And I went and got my shot.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, we were going through the whole business about, we didn't have any tests going on in Macon County. There was, I went to the public health department and they were saying, well, we got 922 counties that we got to deal with. And therefore we will get to y'all sometimes. Well, in this community, having a test time from 10 to 2 in the afternoon does not work. So you are not telling me that you're really concerned about the welfare of our people when you are doing all kinds of things administratively that says that you don't care. So, we said, okay. We were so fortunate to have in the public health department over the public lab, as well as the fact that we were able to get some tests, and we were the first, and it was the Tuskegee, the Movement 46. 46 is our tag. I mean, and that grew out of a whole nother thing that this we don't have time to talk about, but it brought the people together. Okay. And we started expressing how we were really feeling about our lives and where we were in this community. And one of the big issues was we don't have a healthcare system. And so I had already started dealing with it in the foundation because I knew we did not have a hospital. So I went technology. How do we get people to the doctor? And so, we started dealing with telemedicine.
All right.
I didn't know anything.
Hold up. We need to get into conversational stuff. I don't want to interrupt
well,
you.
You asked me, so
I'm gonna gauge everybody else into this because it's important that what you're saying is very important. It is what you saw, it's what you did. See, you didn't just see it, Mayor Dunn. you did something about what you
There
saw.
we go.
That's
Right.
true.
And
That's
that's what's critically important. That's why I wanted to bring Dr. Jawani into the conversation, because she's looked at medicine up close. You know,
Mhm.
she looked at the disparities and she decided that I'm going to do something differently. Right.
Brave.
I mean, and the point of the matter is, and that's where I want to go to now, this notion of thinking out of the box
Mhm.
and being responsive to the marginalized,
Yes.
the subjugated, and the disenfranchised, right?
Mhm.
Excuse
Right.
me, Mayor Neal,
Uh,
I must say this.
uh-huh.
Don't forget the issue of racism.
If
That
you
is a
don't,
very critical part of this whole.
you are absolutely right. And if you don't understand racism, then anything else you think you understand will only
That's
serve to
right.
confuse you.
That's
I don't
exactly
disagree with you, Mayor. Dr. Jawani, help us out about this. How did you see all of this in the midst of COVID?
It was really disappointing, actually. So I was actually a surgical resident at the time, and I was on the trauma service at the hospital here in Birmingham. And I think I can speak for every healthcare provider that in between February and March, where we were hearing and watching the news, and we were seeing patients coming in like nothing had changed, right? Meaning the same volume of patients, the same kind of patients, meaning indigent care, patients who were coming in off the streets that were homeless, people who were still of color, people who were white, didn't matter, right? So the population coming into the hospital didn't change dramatically. But what did change was that we were told that we didn't have enough personal protective equipment, right? So here we are, all panicked. We're like, okay, great. So is there a triage system? How are we going to screen people when they come through the door? Right. We had all these internal conversations. So to kind of allude to how Dr. Dunn talked about, like talking about the elephant in the room, this is the big elephant in the room, right? No one wanted to talk about like, well, how are we protecting ourselves and how are we protecting the patients that are coming through the door, right? If everything else is status quo. And it was a scary time. It was a lot of panic inside. We did end up finding PPE from all kinds of places. I mean, you saw how people were multi-purposing, like ponchos, raincoats,
Wow.
things, umbrellas. I mean, people used whatever they could to try to help the situation and protect ourselves and help other people. It got to the point where we ran out of PPE and we didn't have enough PPE to protect ourselves, to the point where we actually designated areas of the hospital that could not handle and take COVID patients, just so that we could have a cohort that was separate, and people who did not have COVID could not run the risk of potentially getting COVID. Okay. And then it came so far as then we were saying, okay, we have run out that now we're going to take one of our satellite hospitals and we're going to designate that as the COVID-free hospital, which we all know, right? When you're in panic or when you want to get seen, right? No one's really following the rules, right? You have people calling in favors. Oh, my friend of mine got sick and, he needs to see an emergency medicine doctor ASAP or has a surgical problem, so they run him through, right? Next thing you know, now you have these stragglers that don't realize that they have COVID. It's no fault of their own, right? The patient's not really at fault. The person coming in still needs help, right? And then they end up inadvertently infecting other people, right? And so there's so many of us who have gotten COVID multiple times over as healthcare workers, right? And you can see this roller coaster ride where, Mayor Dunn is absolutely right. This idea of confidence and trust is so huge, and it cannot be more overstated in that way. In that, this is not a bandwagon. This isn't like coming to a concert, right? And did you get your tickets? Did you buy your tickets? Did you show up to the party? No, this isn't about that. This isn't about being part of the club. This is about saying, hey, well, we're all in this together, and there should not be this portioning, right? So another thing that happened in Alabama that was also really tragic for us as healthcare workers is there was this rationing and this idea of, okay, certain batches of people, whether they're healthcare professionals or they're nurses or they're doctors or they're people in the general public, were having to figure out when they were going to get access to their vaccine. So believe it or not, I got my vaccine at a community health clinic because, no joke, I got an email from my own hospital saying that they had a shortage and they didn't know when it was going to be available. So there were healthcare workers floating around, right? And as a trauma burn surgeon, I'm going to deal with emergencies, right? So this isn't elective, right? So you're just taking an entire workforce down, if one person gets sick, let alone a
Mm.
whole department gets sick. And so I bring this up not to, bring shame, but to bring light on the idea that preparation is key and that trust is key. And if you can build that trust, then you can build a community that if you're scared, you have questions, you want to plan something, you know that you have somebody that you can go to, right? And that's what I think we didn't have. So what we did is we had each other. And we all know what happens. You can have a community that comes together like we have so eloquently, so elegantly, right? Come together and taking care of each other. But it's not a replacement for a system failure, right? It's not a replacement for that.
You make a salient point. Dr. Segal, let me go back to what Mayor Dunn said. And I'm going to put this on you because I know you can handle this. And let's deal with race and racism as a system, structural and otherwise. Let's address disparities in the healthcare system that predated COVID and how it exacerbated COVID in marginalized communities. Let's talk about comorbidities and social determinants of health, right? And how those things were illuminated, right, through COVID. And then, as Dr. Brooks said, now you want us to go back to you want us to level set back to dysfunctionality, right? Right? How do we advance to the point of, as Dr. Brooks says, transformational, right, thinking versus going back to a comfort zone?
Well, thank you, Mary Neal, for a complicated, but
that's because
really,
I love you. I just want you to know that.
Really engaging question, right? And so there are layers and levels of racism, right, that have defined this pandemic, right? And so let's not forget the anti-Asian and anti-Asian American racism that became very prominent in March of 2020, right? And that continues in Asian American communities today with attacks on Asian American elders, with prominent political figures, branding the virus, right, with a national origin, right? And with subsequent waves of the virus until the WHO stepped in, similarly so, right? And then there's this second order racism, right? That's systemic, that's existed in this country, right? That's defined the circumstances, the playing field, right? That the virus has spread across the country in, right? And so, Mary Neal, you very wisely point out comorbidities and pre-existing conditions and the health status, right? That is not equitably distributed across a population, right? Where our Black and Brown friends and neighbors and family are more likely to experience that set of health conditions that predisposes them to bad outcomes, right? You layer on top of that the fact that our Black and our Brown family, friends, and neighbors are less likely to have access to healthcare and the enabling resources to get good care when you need it. As Dr. Jawani wisely pointed out, at the very beginning of the pandemic, and often when healthcare is high volume, right, social networks and community ties are an entry point into the healthcare system. You get a phone call from someone and says, hey, my mom, my aunt, my neighbor urgently needs care and there's not space, right? Can you help, right? And we saw the impact of those networks through COVID. In fact, we're seeing them today, right? Where Paxlovid, a very effective, but still poorly distributed therapeutic, right, is more availed, right, in communities of privilege, is better accessed by people who have it, right? And I've heard stories recently, and we've had some prominent super spreader events here in the district, right?
No joke, Sherlock.
but I'm hearing stories about, well, I called my friend the doctor and my friend called around, right? Or I knew someone who knew someone at a pharmacy, so I got my prescription, right? That's not how healthcare is supposed to work. But importantly, that's how healthcare has worked, right? Far, far preceding the pandemic, right? And so to bring it back to Mayor Dunn's point about racism, right? It's that ingrained and systemic racism that has wrought these health inequities that defined the playing field, right? And look, things weren't good before the pandemic, right? But they've become so much worse because of it, right? And so, we were talking about blessings earlier, right? This spotlight that has been shined on the inequities that have defined the past 2.5 years in this country, right, has made it very hard for people, right, to continue with their blindfolds, to not see how inequity plays a role in access to health.
Dr.
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Dr.
Dr. T.
Dr. Chicago, there's a message from the barbershops and salons. Ain't nobody want to go back to normal.
Yeah.
Okay. Because back to normal is what you just described.
Yeah.
And so people are taking up their arms in the sense that in the shops, and you're going to meet some of the barbers and stylists shortly,
Right.
they're still mitigating.
Yeah.
They're making sure their people have masks.
Yeah.
They're still doing clinics as needed. And this whole network represented in these bars behind me has been mobilized.
Yeah.
We should not turn back. And when they say this term, lost generation, Dr. Brooks, about the kids who have gone through the pandemic, are there not some lessons learned as well that can be lifted up? Because it's a talk as if we've lost them. I reject that. I reject that. And we're still in the pandemic. As a administrator of schools, as a shepherd of our children, what do you see?
I'll tell you this, and just for the record, I'm 54, so that's 5 decades plus a few. I have never seen a more creative group of children, of learners in my life.
Okay.
The number of executives, of entrepreneurs, of social media experts, of inquisitive minds that are there. I have a young man who's a 10th grader, and he has his own LLC. And he is a gaming technician. Gamers all over the world pay him for his technical expertise to help them advance or correct issues in the gaming world and process. Before, the adults were the holders of the funds, of the knowledge, of the privilege. We have had a dramatic shift. We think about kids with labor laws where they were made to work in sweat factories and grind. We have the opposite of that now. We have kids at the most innovative levels we have ever seen them. And we have to have a paradigm shift to support that and to craft that.
Okay.
It's a fine time for transformation.
I love it.
But again, we are so eager to get back to normalcy, which was not normal,
Right.
Right.
which was dysfunctionalism, which was a system of inequities, that we can't embrace the opportunity that we have at this moment.
Dr. Carter and Meg, I want you to get ready to tee you up for something for the Public Health Minute. So get ready for but if I want to ask Dr. Carter this. Dr. Carter, the long hauler effect has not been fully realized in terms of us understanding the long-term impact of it. How has public health shifted the paradigm in terms of looking futuristically at the impact of COVID on those survivors?
Those long haulers are currently not well understood. Just to say, people write long articles, etc., but they're not really understood that well. But there is a huge effort in both in the healthcare community to be sure that we understand what the different types of being a long hauler, what that actually means. There are institutions that are cropping up that are being able to take care of long haulers. And from a public health standpoint, we have to make sure that nobody ever gets in the situation where they have to be a long hauler.
There you go.
They
Mhm.
have to get their they have to get their vaccination. They got to get boosted. They got to stay away from trying to get COVID disease if they can stay away. And if you are, at least if you're boosted, your likelihood of being a long hauler is much, much less than if you're just a totally unvaccinated person. And again, it goes back to educating people and people believing you know, that and understanding what this virus can actually do to you, because it can attack any part of your body, primarily your lungs, your heart, your kidneys, but it can affect your brain, you know, since your senses, just, it can do that. It can go there, live, and ultimately you get these things. And this long haul effect of COVID is actually something that is not new for viruses, because you can look back, people have long haul effects from other viruses that it never really came to fruition. Now with COVID, you see it. And that means that even when you get the flu virus, you should be a little concerned about, you might have a long haul effect from it. Even if you get another type of virus, you got to be concerned, because a virus can live inside you for a minute and then cause damage. So you don't, when public health comes out and said, we want to get you in a position where you don't get it, get your vaccination, stay your 6 feet apart, use your mask. When those things happen, we mean it. I mean, because we don't want you to become a long hauler. We don't, and that is really, from a public health perspective, that's where we are. But the health system is responding. But to be honest with you, enough time hasn't even gone by enough to know what a long hauler actually what that really means.
Yeah, we don't know in the long run, but we do know cognitive decline is one of them, right?
That's one, yeah.
Right. Mobility, right?
Yeah, they're different. It can affect you in different ways.
Right. And so there's some things we know that now the question is, how are we adjusting, even with education? If a child gets COVID and has some cognitive decline, is there any way to assess that and then accommodate him in some or her in some way based on something to which they have no control over? Right.
Well,
how do we have that conversation in a broader context?
Well, we have to start with the science. We have to understand it, you know, because at least that's where I start. I always start with the science. If I understand it, if I know what the research tells me about that, then I can explain it to a population, or when, you know, I'm a pediatrician, or if I can explain it to a mom, I know what the science has told me that what these long haul effects are. And there are different viruses are really, really interesting things, because they can cause all kinds of systemic problems. And so when a kid gets a specific one, you are able to talk about that specifically. But our institutions, my friends at NIH and in these institutions are working very hard to characterize what long haul effect actually means in adults.
Now, Dr. Carter,
Go ahead.
we got barbers and stylists that are going to see some of these people as members of their businesses, as clients, not as patients. But they're going to see, and there are going to be things that they may see, whether it's hair loss or other things. That's also part of this conversation. And Mayor, I'm looking here, I'm saying, can you believe it's 8:13?
I can't believe it, you know, but you know what? When it's our fault that we brought this kind of power on one show, right? You know, you could have just one of them and it'd have been enough for a show, but you put all of this, we loaded it up. And so we expect that. Meg, tell us about the numbers. We talked about 1 million people dying. And I think sometimes we, statistics cease to be a motivator for us, right? And that we become desensitized because there so many people died. But we don't want to let it be lost upon us that these are souls, these are family members, these are human beings that have lost their lives,
brothers,
many of which should never have died.
Sisters.
And so let's talk a little bit about it. Meg Jordan with the Public Health Minute.
Yeah, absolutely. When you asked me to bring this together, what I was thinking about these 995,000 people we've lost right in the past 2 years. But I was also thinking about all of us who lived. What did we experience? And I thought that through. So these are some of the art that's come out of the pandemic, right? These are the experiences. So we have lost 995,000 people now. Next, Maggie. If you can believe it, we're in week 113 of this pandemic. The first death in America was logged on March 2nd, 2020. Next, Maggie. And in that time, we've had 5 different kinds of COVID. We've had Alpha, the original. We've had Beta, what we used to call the South African variant. We've had Gamma, what we called the Brazil variant. We still have Delta, and we still have Omicron. Next. In the time, in the year 2020, 485 million people downloaded Zoom, and this became a way of life for many of us. Things like this became day to day. Next. But also, since March of 2020, 900,813 people have been evicted in this country, and that number still grows. 9,000 people were evicted last week. Next, Maggie. Since the COVID pandemic came, 81.6 million people have gotten COVID. That's about 25% of the United States. COVID became the 3rd highest cause of death in 2020. It overtook 7 other things that used to kill Americans, and it killed the same number of people as car accidents and strokes combined in the year of 2020. Next, Maggie. When you take the number of deaths and you take the number of weeks, in this past 2 years, there were 8,800 funerals a weekend. Next, Maggie. And we know that the pandemic isn't over. We've had 105,000 new cases as of yesterday. And yesterday, 1,929 people died of COVID-19.
Wow.
You know,
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thanks,
just
Meg. Thank you so much, Meg. That was powerful, and it's really encapsulated. Dr. T, what were you saying?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Meg as well, but I wanted to also point out something she did. And Neil, in terms of our students, we prepare to present data. What did she do? She first contextualized it, and then she gave the numbers. Because when you have the numbers without the context, it's like, what's wrong with those people? When you put the context on it, you realize the inequalities in our system that made them vulnerable. We got to do more of that. So often our public health data, Dr. Carter, Neil, Dr. Juwani, is used in a way that denigrates the very neighborhoods we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't give solutions. So we got to move forward, like we say, Dr. Brooks, not go back to that model, collecting the data, denigrate the community, and then wonder why it's a food desert. Who wants to put a grocery store there when 65% of the people have diabetes? That's a heavy load on your workforce. So these are things that are part of the conversation we want to bring into the barbershops as well.
Yeah.
I hope to have a chance to meet some of our colleagues.
Well, that's what we're
Mr.
about
Mayor?
to do. If you, Dr. Sharon Cooper, let's bring her up. And Dr. Cooper has been with us for a long time. She has certainly been with us through the beginning of the Cutting Edge show, but even prior to that. Dr. Cooper, how are you doing today?
All is well. All is well. Thank you.
You know,
And let
we're
me just
talking
say,
about, go ahead.
Just real quick to Dr. Carter. Dr. Cooper has been part of our team shepherding the barbers and stylists through the process to become certified community health workers by the state of Maryland. And she's been the shepherd to help make that happen. And we've got our first 3, Dr. Juwani and Mayor and Dr. Brooks, who are certified by the state. We're going to see how we can translate that into transformation. Hey, Sharon.
Great. Wonderful.
Well, this has just been a wonderful evening talking about transformational change and a wonderful opportunity to sit with visionaries. As we can see in building a culture of health, it's going to be an uphill battle, but it's something that due to work such as Dr. Carter, Dr. Thomas, and all the others, that it is something that is doable and the effect of change has already occurred. Solutions, we talked about solutions. This approach with the barbershop and hair salons, that is bridging the gap. That is providing that knowledge, health literacy, and connecting or building that bridge to connect individuals in the community who are vulnerable to healthcare. And the last thing I'm going to say is, Dr. Carter, I've worked with you on SAMHSA's project, Consent to Share. So it's good to see you once again. And that was an interoperability to connect primary care to behavioral health, linking those two entities so that there's continuity and coordination of care and folks are not left as far as falling through the gaps of care and increasing and improving access. So thank you all for sharing your knowledge, and it's all applicable, and I'm looking forward to sharing that in various enterprises that I work with.
Good.
Right,
Thanks
right.
so much, Dr. Cooper. Let's go to Atlanta. Andre Russell. He is an entrepreneur. He has a barbershop in the Atlanta airport.
The busiest airport in the world.
There you go.
Busiest airport in the world. Andre, how you doing, man? We don't have a lot of time today.
I know. How's everybody doing?
What's your reflections on today?
Well, I was trying to take some notes, but there's a couple of things that I was interested in. With the amount of people that go through the airport and the conversations that we have, there's going to be more of a focus on our target of communication in order for us to get our point across. And I'm very interested in this triage transformation, and I want to see how that works. I don't know how to get in contact with the rest of you guys about this, but I'll look it up. And I want to pass this knowledge on to my barbers and the rest of the staff. But it is always a pleasure coming in, talking to you guys. I learned something, not just once or twice, but every time. And now what I'm trying to do is focus on how to pass this knowledge forward.
Hey, Mr. Mayor,
Good.
let me just say this about
Thanks,
Andre.
thanks, Andre. Good.
Just real quick, and yeah, thank you, Andre.
Mhm.
Andres has a clinical partner he's worked with. They've done over 1,000 COVID vaccinations, over 1,000 needles in arms. Okay, snap for this brother.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Absolutely.
And now they're moving into some other areas, and we want to make sure we protect both him, his business, as the institutions come in, to recognize the true gift that you provide. But here's what I wanted to say: the guys who sweep the floor, Andre,
Mhm.
you know, the young men who swept the floor and then came back. Just tell this audience what it meant to mentor them.
Oh, well, yeah, a lot of these guys, we started off while they were in high school, et cetera, and they come and sweep the floor and brush off our customers. And we've been busy for quite a few years. And now they're coming out of college, getting married, and they're coming all the way back and say, well, you know, you're going to cut my son's hair. And, you know, I talked to you guys about you guys to my wife and spread it out amongst what they do. But they said they never would have gone to college. They never would have taken up the things they had taken up without them being inside the barbershop. Because inside the shop, we would teach them how to play chess. We would have conversations with their homework. So it was not, inside the barbershop, it's kind of hard to say because I know it happens in every barbershop, but there's always learning going on in barbershops. And, you know, we're a God-fearing family, and we are always trying to inspire the young people as they come along.
Good.
All
Thanks
right,
so
all right.
much.
And I was
Dr.
gonna
Brooks,
say,
I know what we're
Stop
saying.
encouraging me to talk.
Yeah, you know,
I know.
you know, he did it, you know, and he, you know, you don't do that.
Mayor Neal, can I
Go
just ask, because I have been given the task of organizing community health workers for the state of Alabama. And it is an extension of your work, Dr. Thomas, because I think you just really organized a way for regular people to get regular information that's good for their health. And I really do admire that. I think that I want to say one last thing. We've got to reorganize our health system. There's no question about it. And I think community health workers, along with barbers and hairdressers, play a major role in the distribution of information, for recognizing when somebody needs help, even though sometimes they don't want to admit that, and being able to direct people to the proper resources. So I'm looking forward to being involved. And Dr. Cooper, I'm going to be calling on you.
Let me just say, you're now, Mayor. You're now part of the team. We're going
You
to
part of
partnership
you've
with Tuskegee.
you've always been a part of my family. Now you're part of the greater family here, Dr. Mayor
We'll
Dunn.
hook you up.
Okay, absolutely. Anything you need, you call it done.
Right.
Call it done.
All is done. All is done.
A poet that don't know it, right?
Hey, we got Philadelphia out there, Momar.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see who else. Okay, we got Sandra Jenkins. Hey, Sandra Jenkins, how you doing? Let's go to Philadelphia.
Yes, I'm doing well. Right now, I'm just taking all this knowledge in. It's just amazing.
Tell them who you are real quick.
Okay. Well, my name is Sandra Jenkins. I'm currently looking forward to commencement to become a community health worker of Pennsylvania.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
Name of your shop?
Go ahead. Got a few things that we got about a minute, and then we got something that we're going to end the show with. Go ahead,
Sandra. Go ahead.
Sandra, go ahead.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to share with everyone the importance of the community piece of all of this, and being a business owner and engaged in the hair salon setting, building a reputation, and also a clientele that you've grown with over the past 20 plus years, going into the back to work in this industry with those individuals. It's just really a very important to build up the trust factor here, the trust piece, and having folks to understand, the importance of not just hair care, but their overall health, and getting it from someone that you're constantly engaging with and multiple conversations, as well as beautifying them. So I must say that this is such a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for the industry to take on. And I must say, that is a major, major piece on advancing what we do.
And I want everyone here to know that Sandra Jenkins has also had vaccination clinics in her shop, Needles and Arms.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. I see Stacy Ruffin, her, she's on, but I don't see her.
Michelle Lamb, if you're in
she
there.
is now. Bring her up now, because she was hiding from me. To say a couple of words, Stacy, rejuvenate up in the Philadelphia area as well.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say, looking forward to the 16th when we do our vaccination clinic, and I hope everybody have a happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell them about your vaccination clinic, because it's going to be very special. Quickly.
This would be my second one, well, third one at the salon, but it's going to be with the 11-year-old Najee, the barber. So we
the world's youngest barber. She's 11
right,
years
11-year-old young lady.
Yes, so we're looking forward to that. We've been putting out the work. We're trying to get it into the schools by Monday, so they will know. So we've been putting it out at the complex. So we're looking forward to that. And
so tell Dr. Carter who your clinical partner is.
Walmart.
Okay. Pharmacy stepped up.
Right.
Yes.
Good.
Yes. So
Good.
I see
Thanks,
Michelle Lamb out
Stacy.
there.
All right. Well, let me say this. One is, this has been wonderful. Can you see how quickly time flies when you're having fun?
Thank you,
That's
Dr.
what they
Carter,
always
hanging
tell me.
out with us.
Absolutely. Dr. Carter, you said you had to leave, right?
Don't
Right.
leave yet. No, hold on.
Man, you know how much we love you, man. You can't leave us like that. Thank you so much for hanging in with us. Dr. Jawani, thank you so much. Lord knows how much you've contributed to this exchange. You are a special person, and you have a friend in us anytime you need us, okay? Dr. Mayor Lucinia Dunn, boy, are you comfortable with putting it where the cows can get it?
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, that kind of courage doesn't mean that you're unafraid. Courage means that you act appropriately in the face of fear, and to put it where people can understand the context, because if you don't put racism, then you have nothing in context, because racism permeates all people activity, right? So thank you for bringing that to the table. You know, Dr. Segal, you know, you are truly, I want to come to your class. I want to be your student. I want to be in that kind of class, right? Where you are really laying it out, man. You have such a clarity of thought about public health, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You are a great asset. Thank you so very much. Dr. Brooks, words are inadequate to describe you and what you're doing, and that you have chosen purpose for your life. And although you transition through different jobs, your purpose remained the same, which is to develop human capital development for our young people particularly. And so we thank you for that commitment to educating our children. Again, to Sandra Jenkins and to Andre and to Stacy and to Dr. Cooper and to everyone who's joined with us, we are so appreciative of you on this day. We chose this day to reflect on a million souls that we've lost.
Yes.
And we don't want that to be lost. That's significant. You know, 1 million people, if we called everybody's name, listen to what I'm saying. If we called everybody's name out one at a time, 1 million people, it would take an entire year, 24 hours, 7 days a week to call everybody's name.
Right.
That's how significant this is. And so I normally have something profound to say at the end. I'm not going to do that this time. I want a person to sing a song. It was Martin Luther King Day, a show we did where we had Dr. King. In fact, he's now Dr. Ferguson, who is Dr. King. He introduced Mahalia Jackson as she sang Precious Lord. So as we leave today, I want to leave with Precious Lord as we think about, pray for the families that have lost loved ones due to COVID. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. King introducing Mahalia Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor Neal. You know, through the struggle, it has been, as we spoke about it earlier, there was many difficulties, many trials and tribulations, but we persevered. And one of the great things that really helped inspire us and keep us going was the music. I've always said it was the music and the message of the movement. And Mahalia Jackson, as many of you know, is my favorite singer, and a voice like that only comes once in a century. And so I am very delighted and honored to present to you tonight, singing my very favorite song, Mrs. Mahalia Jackson.
Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand, Lord, I am tired, I am weak, I am through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone. Hear my cry. Hear my cry. Guide my feet, lest I fall. Take, Lord, take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
All right.
Lord have mercy.
All
That's
right.
the way
Whoa.
I wanted to end this great evening. I'd like to thank Dr. T, my friend and colleague, for your leadership. Lastly, leaders require vision. It is your vision that has brought us to this space, and so we are appreciative to you. I'd like to leave you with these two words, as I always say on my talk show, that I love you with the perfect love. But more importantly, remember this: you got the power. Until next week, same time, same station on the cutting edge.
All
We
right.
bid you a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.